Stretch drive of the National Hockey League season. This is InGoal Radio, the podcast presented by the Hockey Shop, source for sports Surrey, thehockeyshop.com. Let you know what's happening over with Cam and company in Surrey with the true 12.2 line coming up in the gear segment. And our feature interview this week is a fascinating, fun, cool journey with the Anaheim Ducks goalie coach, Sudarshan Maharaj. We'll stop by and chat with Kevin Woodley, who joins us now, along with the co-founder of InGoal magazine, David Hutchison. Do you guys feel a different vibe, Hutch, as we close in on the end of the National Hockey League season and get ready for the playoffs?
Everything's starting to feel just a little bit more serious, isn't it? As things are getting sorted out for the playoffs and teams are getting aligned and thinking about what's next for them, who the opponents will be, and who's starting. And we had an interesting conversation around the table before we started recording here about who's going with who in net and who has concerns. It's things get really exciting now, don't they?
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not feeling it yet. And I think it's because the day job is to cover the Vancouver Canucks. And there's still 9 or 8 games left in their season, and they play till May 18th or 19th. And to be perfectly honest, like the fact that other teams only have 2 or 3 games left, and like the teams that are out could be making, coaching change decisions. They're gonna do their baggy day and clean out the locker room like next week. And I got like another 10 days left in my season to cover, and I'm having trouble getting there, boy. So I'm going to rely on you guys to sort of pull me into the excitement of pending playoff hockey. Because I actually honestly think that playoff hockey is going to start, and I'm still going to have to cover the Vancouver Canucks and Calgary Flames 3 and 4 nights after the playoffs start elsewhere. That's the sense I'm getting of the schedule. Those games will occur while the playoffs are already going on in other places.
Like, if there's any further delay, and touch wood, let's hope there isn't, but there could be 9 teams left during the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, or 10 teams, whoever Vancouver is playing, because they could be playing those regular season games. Let's get into some of the goaltending talk around the National Hockey League. I challenged you two gentlemen to come up with your divisional nominee for the Vezina Trophy. So instead of the traditional 3 finalists, we have a winner from each division, and then we'll put them into a pot. We're not going to do the final voting today, but I'm curious, who are your nominees from the East, the West, the Central, and the North? And let's start with the East, if we can. Hutch.
Oh, you have to start where it gets a little tough.
I know. I thought we'd go there, and
we can't
then
go with. Can we go with the West? I'll do the West and the Central, and Woody can do the East and the North.
Not a chance.
No?
I'm not letting you off the hook. No way.
You know that old expression, I feel like I brought a knife to a gunfight?
Yeah.
Woody's the only one who's got access to all these advanced stats. So it doesn't matter what I say. He's going to come back with, yeah, guys, but the environment that guy's working in.
It's not a debate. It's just an opinion.
It's just an opinion.
Don't worry, you're going to be right and I'm going to be wrong, because the general managers just look at the win column. That's all you need to do.
Yeah. Okay. How about I do this? I'm going to say I think Semyon Varlamov is probably going to get picked by a lot of people, and I think Woody's going to come back with Igor Shesterkin.
That is such a cop-out.
Is it a cop-out?
Of a selection.
He's
what
actually
do you say,
right.
Woody?
I mean, I've heard a lot. He's bang on. Like, Varlamov is a guy who's actually getting like legit buzz for, this guy could be a Vezina Trophy finalist. Like, forget his, not just doing it in the division. I've heard people say he should be a Vezina Trophy finalist based on his raw numbers. His adjusted numbers are still good. Like, he's above expected, but to the tune of 18th in the league. And I would say that 18th in the league in terms of your performance probably shouldn't get you a Vezina Trophy nomination. But what the hell? They gave Andrei Vasilevsky a finalist, and he was in the 30s last year. So raw numbers and wins matter more. Hutch is probably right. Varlamov will be the guy. But the fancy math, the Clearsight analytics statistics do tell you that Shesterkin should be. He's in the top 10 in the entire league right now. Kind of tough to pick him because it hasn't been the season we envisioned. But I think if you're a Rangers fan, and my God, with what's gone on there this week, they're not going to make the playoffs with, what are they, like 56 points right now? They'd make the playoffs in every other division. They just happen to be in the toughest one. So it's tough to give Shesterkin a vote, but he's been the best goalie in that division this season. And I think if you're a Rangers fan, this is the bright side. It hasn't been a steady progression for him from last year. Development is never linear, as they say. And yet, as the year's gone on, he's started to look more and more like that guy more often. And given them the type of goaltending that I think they're going to need moving forward, and it's legit high end. So,
I think it's a great step the first year after Hank. I think that's maybe one of the most positive things about it, that there's not that gaping hole in goal. What about the West, Woody? Let's start with you there, and you only have to pick for yourself. You don't have to pick for Hutch.
Right. So I start with the East, and then you give him the softball.
This is an easy one. Listen.
The complaining in this segment is overwhelming right now.
I know. I told you Woody was grumpy today, and it's all coming from me, isn't it?
Yeah.
Don't you whiners.
Where do
This
you go?
is a no-brainer, and this is a guy that I would actually tout
Slam dunk.
should probably win the whole thing, and we can have that debate later because I don't think he will. But Marc-Andre Fleury with a bullet. His season has been Vezina worthy from start to finish. Maybe a little dip there in the middle, but everyone has them. Andrei Vasilevsky had a much bigger dip, frankly, that seemed to get ignored. Marc-Andre Fleury is the guy. He's the only guy who's been better than him, but hasn't played enough games to be in this conversation statistically, is Peter Mrazek. Flower has been better than Vasilevsky on a per shot basis, and even though he's played less, he's actually saved more goals relative to Vasilevsky this year. He's number one in the NHL, so he's definitely going to be number one in the West. There's no debate.
So he just said that we would have the Vezina conversation later, and then Woody laid the whole thing out.
Yeah. Then he went right through it.
Yeah, perfect.
What about the West? Grubauer and Marc-Andre Fleury were the two guys that separated themselves this season. Hutch, do you agree with Fleury?
Yes, of course. With a bullet, that was an easy call. I was just thinking with some of these, it might almost be fun to talk about some unsung guys, some guys that maybe have had quietly good years or good years on bad teams, or I don't know. I think Cam Talbot's had a pretty solid year there for Minnesota and getting overlooked perhaps. Not as big name a team, not as successful as a team. So maybe an honorable mention to him, but of course it's Fleury, and he would be my favorite for the Vezina as well. But we're not having that conversation yet. So
that's a good. I like the Cam Talbot there, Hutch. Gotta be honest with you, because around the league, like I said, I think Fleury's a no-brainer in this division. But around the league, you hear more buzz for Philip Grubauer in that third hole. Like, this is going to be a Fleury Vasilevsky discussion to win the Vezina, and it's sort of the only question is who sort of ends up third in voting. And I hear more buzz for Philip Grubauer in that number 3 spot. And Cam Talbot's statistics relative to, again, the shot quality in front of him are identical to Philip Grubauer's. He should be in that conversation every bit as much.
And a guy that has got his team playing above what was expected at the start of the year and challenging for first place in the West. The Central, considering Woody's already thrown Vasilevsky's name out there 7 times, I assume that's where we're going, but UC Saros has had one heck of a year himself. Hutch, back to you.
Well, again, this one was pretty obviously Vasi, and then I had right below him UC Saros as well, both for a fantastic performance, especially later in the season. And of course, being a short guy, I think there's got to be goaltending per inch or something like that. And want to give a little bit of an adjusted shout out to UC Saros. I think it's fantastic to see how well he's doing. It's an interesting division, isn't it? Because you've got some great performances in Carolina, as Woody just mentioned, and in Florida as well. Another team that's sort of doing it by committee, and we've seen now three different. 4 different guys playing, is it this year? But 3 notable guys in terms of how things have been going. So I think it's a bit of an interesting division. And then if I might give another one of those unsung shout outs, I think in Detroit, actually both Jonathan Bernier and Thomas Greiss have had some good seasons here, and Thomas especially more recently put up some great numbers. So Elvis Merzlikins has got some pretty good numbers lately as well, down there at the bottom of the division. So there's some really interesting performances in the Central, Woody, aren't there?
Yeah, and there's also some really interesting sort of juxtapositions too. Like Peter Mrazek, with more games, is in this conversation with Andre Vasilevsky, assuming, of course, and it's never a safe assumption to make because part of the job is sort of being able to do it over an extended period of time. But if he'd stayed healthy and played more, the numbers in his game so far tell you he would be in this conversation. And then on the other end of that, Alex Nedeljkovic, whose raw numbers, some might argue, should put him in this conversation. He still had a really nice year, but like he's 19th in the NHL. And that's a team that's doing it with an environment that's really friendly to their goaltenders. Mrazek's just outperforming it even at that. The one question I have is especially when we look at, differences in expected, like Nedeljkovic's expected environment, his expected save percentage is one of the highest in the National Hockey League right now. And Mrazek's is quite a bit lower. And so it's really tempting to say, wow, I mean, like same team. We've seen it before, but same team. Like, is it really that different? And is it really that much easier for one goalie and the other? And there are times when, hey, especially you get a young kid, like Swayman's environment's a lot easier than Tuukka's. And sometimes teams rally around a young goaltender and play well in front of him and try and support him. But in Nedeljkovic's case, I wonder how much of it is his handle. Like the way they get out of their zone, is it that much better because Ned stops more pucks behind the net, because Ned moves the puck so much better? We saw the overtime assist, off the boards to a breakaway, like perfect apple to win the game. And, sometimes I think we saw it with Henrik Lundqvist and Igor Shesterkin last year. Lundqvist's defensive environment was a way worse than Shesterkin's. But how much credit should Shesterkin get for the fact that he was so much more active and good at moving the puck and getting them out of their own zone as opposed to pinned in their own zone when Henrik was in net? So it's a fascinating sort of subset that even though I can throw these raw numbers at you that say that Ned's environment's been that much easier, maybe he deserves some credit for creating part of that himself. And, frankly, it would require a lot more work to sort of look at the tape and see how big that impact is. But I think it would be ignorant to ignore it completely.
Two things. Nedeljkovic has had a great progression to the National Hockey League. Like he's done it at every level. So he's earned this opportunity. And the numbers shouldn't just be dismissed, not saying you are. Number two is I can now, for the first time, in like 3 years, look at that name and know how to say it. And that, I think, is the biggest progression by most broadcasters is it flows off the tongue now. You don't go, what is that?
Nedeljkovic. See, it was easier for me because I got to cover his first NHL start, and actually, interestingly enough, after looking a little nervous maybe at the early beginnings, it was a couple of early touches with the puck that fed his confidence in that start, and something he admitted to me in the postgame afterwards, like really helped him settle in. He's just so good handling the puck. It's such a big part of his game. And yeah, I'm not at all trying to dismiss it. Like first year, he's top 20 in the NHL, adjusted numbers. That's impressive. The other part of that, Darren, any team in the National Hockey League could have had this guy for nothing on waivers at the beginning of the season, and Carolina so expected to lose him that they claimed Anton Forsberg so they would have an insurance policy in place when they lost Ned, which they expected to happen, and created the whole musical chairs of waiver wires just because they expected somebody else was going to take this kid. Nobody did, and now look what he's doing for them. He's been a massive part of their season, and he was a goalie they did not expect to have on their roster because they didn't have the cap space to carry 3. They had to put somebody on waivers, and they figured they were going to lose him. So that's an aspect of this story that doesn't get told very often. I'm even retaliatory. I expected the Edmonton Oilers to pick him up, just like, okay, you took Forsberg, we're taking Nedeljkovic and making sure we have a 3. Oilers obviously with some cap space issues of their own, but
and quarantine.
Yeah,
right?
and the quarantine, but like still, like honestly, the raw numbers are what they are, right? Was he a 942 right now? And every team in the league could have had him in a year where many were carrying 3 anyways.
Hot show. We've had a lot from Woody on the Central Division nominee. There's only one thing missing. Do you know what that is? The Central Division nominee by Woody.
It's Vassy. Come on. Like it's
no. He still hasn't told us. who he's
So you
picking
gave him another.
from the
So you
Central
just give him
Division.
so you give Woody an opening for another 5-minute conversation here.
Well, I just thought we should officially get the nominee. He talked for 8 minutes on Carolina, who he's not even going to select.
Yeah, okay,
so
okay.
it is Vasilevsky?
Yeah, it's Vasilevsky. And I was trying to buy time while I Googled the fact that Ned was not prohibitive either. $737,000 cap hit, $750,000 salary. This was not a prohibitive contract for others to take.
Well, he's made that a 3-horse race with his play. So the North, let's go there. And the Vezina Trophy nominee coming out of the North, in your opinion, Woody, is?
Mike Smith. Has to be Mike Smith. Thatcher Demko actually still has better numbers relative to environment on the season as a whole. So if it's pure math, it's Thatcher Demko. And the season obviously interrupted by COVID, right when he was playing at a Vezina Trophy level. He was, he's down to sort of 5th in the league right now. He was right up there with Andre Vasilevsky when the season shut down. So things have fallen off. He hasn't gotten as many games. And actually, as I say that, he's actually faced more shots and chances than Mike Smith has this season. But, the numbers say Demko, but I still got to go with Mike Smith because of the impact on team. Those things matter. Mike Smith's had a bigger impact, and they're going to be the 2nd seed in the North Division, and the Canucks are looking at potentially finishing 7th. So still think Demko might be the better goalie overall, and he has been statistically, but it's hard to ignore the impact Mike Smith has had this season. And because it's this, I honestly believe this is not just a blip. I know the work he put in, as subtle as the changes may be, the work he put in with Adam Francilli in the offseason, as much as he doesn't want to talk about it, Mike Smith, that is, the work he put in with Dustin Schwartz, like his game, it's been interesting because he's sort of denied that it's much different. And yeah, he still lines up on the post and he plays deep and he's still Mike Smith, right? He's still a lot of battle. But his second saves, his recovery, his post play, his move off, recoveries from his knees, like he is no longer one and done and sprawling. It is a totally different look at Mike Smith than what we saw in the past. I think it's repeatable. I'd definitely consider re-signing him if I was the Edmonton Oilers. This is Fountain of Youth might be a stretch, but this isn't just one good season for Mike Smith. See what the playoffs bring, but I think this is fully a repeatable thing and a change that's going to move forward with him.
Hutch, when you talk about impact on the team, remember 2.5, 3 weeks into this campaign, Mike Smith was not playing, and the Edmonton Oilers got off to a very sluggish start. When he returned to the lineup, the Edmonton Oilers took off. Your nominee for the North Division, Vezina.
I also had Mike Smith written down, and I guess the one thing that makes me wonder whether the voters would go with Mike if everybody adopts the Darren Millard plan and there's one nominee per division. I wonder if they would go with him simply because of the 28 games played or something like that right now. It's a little bit on the low end, which tends to be a knock against guys. I feel similar to what we saw last year when Vazzy didn't have great numbers and still won the Vezina. Whether the voters might go with Connor Hellebuck at 42 games played, even though, the thing that stands out there for me is Laurent Brossoit has probably had an equally good year to Hellebuck, albeit with fewer games played. So that's
now,
sort
Hellebuck as the reigning Vezina Trophy winner. Do you think he gets the benefit of that?
Well, I think that's what I mean. So, similar to Vazzy, I think the two sort of go together. I think you get the benefit of the doubt because you're the reigning champ, or if you had been a recent nominee. So I have a feeling if there was a vote for all 4 divisions, Helly might pull it out. But yeah, I went with Smitty as well. Woody, I just love something we could analyze a little bit later down the road. You talked about the changes Smitty's made, and you say he's no longer one and done. And a lot of people talk about, how do you evaluate a goaltender? What is it you're looking for? For me, that's a huge piece. Is a goaltender able to make that second, that third save, whether they should or they shouldn't? And I don't mean in a scrambly way. Do they have that balance and support in their game that they can make that first save, and then the next one is relatively easy because they can move into position in a balanced, controlled way, not one and done? That would be a fascinating discussion to have somewhere down the road.
That's exactly right there. The second saves are now, he makes them easy, and he used to make them hard on himself. Everything was body first, reaching, which opened him up. Now he's actually staying over his knees, making a push, recovering to his posts, And he's still a massive body, right? And he's still got that fire and that battle. And there are times where he's going to lunge and because that's who Mike Smith is. And those shouldn't be negatives. But the fact is he's not doing it as much on the first save, and he's not one save and then desperation. Like he's sliding around on his knees, like in a controlled manner most of the time. The analogy I made, and it's one that might maybe this is why he doesn't want to talk about it. The analogy I made in Vancouver here, when Roberto was here, they used to call it the Lou flop. And they hated it here in Vancouver because he would end up pitched forward on his belly and sprawled. And there were times when it was an actual taught thing, like, hey, like if you're in a breakaway situation and you're getting extended out and that guy's going to tuck it to the post and you release forward let your torso fall forward, your leg actually extends another 2 to 3 inches. Like that can be the extension you get that's how you get that extra range of motion on a breakaway, is by letting your torso fall. It frees up the hip. But the changes Mike's made with Adam, in terms of that mobility and that range, have him able to move without getting pitched forward as often as he used to. Because he used to end up in that situation a lot. And so the phrase I used to describe it, and okay, I'm going to there's a back pat here. This is gratuitous, but it was before the season on my show in Edmonton when we were talking about the work he'd done with Adam and then with Dustin. I was asked, how will we know if it's working? And the answer I gave was, if he's not on his belly as often as he used to be. And this is the phrase that probably would make him cringe. His belly flops per 60 has dropped dramatically this year compared to in the past. And it sounds derogatory. It's not meant that way. He is playing with so much more control over his edges right now. It's a massive difference. And he probably doesn't even like to hear that, but it is. There's a reason he went 2 years around 900, and now he's about to become I think only the 6th or 7th goalie in history to be above 920 at the age of in a 38-year-old season. He's 39 now, but it's his 38-year-old season. That's remarkable. And it's not where the trend was going for him. This is a concrete change that's led to this. This isn't just him discovering something or battling through, or as he likes to talk about, I'm more comfortable now knowing I'm not going to be the number one guy. Well, actually, you have been all season since you came back, right? There are physical, technical changes that anyone who understands the position can watch on the ice and juxtapose to last year and see the difference in his game. Rant over.
I think that there should be Woody dedicated music when he goes on one of these little winding journeys of explanations that Hutch, the producer, not just Woody's producer, but the InGoal radio producer as a whole as well. Just on Mike Smith, I talked to Dave Tippett on the Chirp podcast, and we discussed how the personality of that team, while we all know it's skill, the execution of the team, the personality of that team is really Mike Smith. And very, very rarely does a team take on the personality of the goaltender, but when they're playing their best, they have that personality of Mike Smith, and then the skill takes over from there.
And they need that personality. I've been told from people in that room that skill leadership side of things is very quiet. It's a very quiet room. There are not a lot of rah. Also not sometimes it's very business-like at times. It's not fun. It's not Mike Smith provides a lot of the energy to that team, which is why.
Yes. And
I asked Dave Tippett this week at a time when other franchises are using their third goalie. Vasilevsky didn't. I don't even know if he went to Detroit. He didn't play a game or even dress for a game in the back-to-backs with Detroit this weekend. They just used McElhinney and Gibson and gave Vasilevsky the weekend off. And I asked Dave if he would consider dressing Alex Stalock as his backup goalie just to give Mike a complete day off. And he said no, because the rhythm of being on the bench, for one, is something Mike craves. We know how, Mike burns hot and competitive. He wants to be in there, right? Even when he's not playing. But also how much they rely on Mike for the temperature of the team and what he brings to that team. They can't afford to leave him in the press box. Now, the risk is what we saw last night. 4 goals on 4 shots for Mikko Koskinen, and you got to bring Mike Smith in at age 39, cold off the bench a week before your playoffs start, and risk an injury. The good news is, few guys take care of themselves as well as Mike Smith, so you trust that he's done the work on that night off, knowing that it might not be a night off and he's not going to put himself at injury risk because he's not ready.
Our feature interview this week is presented by Sense Arena. Sudarshan Maharaj, Sudsy, the goaltending coach of the Anaheim Ducks. That's coming up. Also, our gear segment brought to you by The Hockey Shop, a source for sports Surrey, thehockeyshop.com. Cam and Woody going to chat about the 12.2 line that's in store now, so stick around for that. Interesting, though, that we have 3 unanimous choices out of the 4 divisions, and that's Andrei Vasilevsky, Marc-Andre Fleury, and Mike Smith. 2 of the 3 have reinvented themselves to a certain extent from last year to this year. And because there's been tweaks to Mike Smith, you've gone over that, and Marc-Andre Fleury has changed his game. You've got a 36-year-old and a 39-year-old as 2 of our 3 unanimous choices out of the division. I don't know whether it's a one-off or because it's a shortened season and we won't have the 82 games, but does that surprise either one of you guys?
I hadn't thought of it that way, to be honest. I guess it shouldn't surprise us because the position evolves constantly, and if you're not evolving with it, you get left behind. And we know that both of those guys, in different ways, Smitty in a fiery way, Flower in his competitive but always having fun way, they're not going to be complacent, right? Both of them made changes because they wanted to compete. They wanted to win. They still want to be the best. And I think it's a sign that, whether it was Roberto Luongo who Marc-Andre Fleury passed this week, those guys never rest on their laurels. They're always looking for ways to get better. And I went through that with Roberto, his career here, and watched him adapt to different coaches and different voices and adding RVH and all these different elements. At no point was he ever complacent. And I think that would sort of be the theme that I think of when I think of Mike Smith and Marc-Andre Fleury as well.
Yeah, and there's no substitute for experience, is there? Something else we've talked about here. You can learn all the skills, but if you can't read the game and if you can't adapt with the game, you're not going to be successful. You might come in as a young goaltender and be on top of the league, but much like third time through the batting order, a team can figure out a pitcher in a baseball game. I think over the course of a career, people figure out goaltenders, and unless the goaltenders are able to be adaptable themselves, they're not going to be successful. And here's some examples of some ultimately experienced and adaptable goaltenders. I mean, I guess you could say that it's selecting for that because we're just talking about the guys who are successful, but I think it's a fascinating look at the evolution of the position as well. We often talk about how shooters are now sort of learning some of our tricks and coming back with more deception in their game, more an understanding of what the goaltenders are doing. And now the position is evolving once again. And so here's some of the most experienced guys in the game are leading the way.
Mike Rosati, first full year as goaltending coach of the Vegas Golden Knights, working with Marc-Andre Fleury. And just to reiterate, taking a chance to just take stock of your game. Like Marc-Andre Fleury wasn't the goaltender that the Vegas Golden Knights went with in the bubble, and Mike Smith lost his job in the bubble off the start. And the 2 players came back and have put it to work and put it to good use. So if you're a goaltender right now and you've gone through this crazy winter and things haven't gone exactly your way, just take those 2 players as motivation and as an example of what you could do. Put in the work now. And there's no guarantee that that things are going to continue the way they did this past winter. You might be able to turn it around in a snap, just like Marc-Andre Fleury and Mike Smith, because I think that's a really good lesson in there somewhere, Hutch, to just motivate people.
I think it's a huge lesson for goaltenders at all levels. Take stock of what you are planning to do over the next 4 months. Here we are, deep into the spring and the summer is ahead. We're all, I hope, looking forward to more normal seasons in the fall. And what's your plan? Where do you want to be when September comes around? And how do you intend to get there? If the answer is, I'm going to go play some shinny with the guys, I think you're probably on the wrong track. unless you're looking for something to improve in your game, unless you have some specific goals about how you're going to change your game, I think you're going to be behind. And I know it's incredibly hard right now because getting on the ice in a lot of places is still a huge challenge. But what sort of tools can you dig up in your bag to make some specific changes to your game so that you can adapt? Because shinny ain't the way to do it, is it?
Yeah, the idea of just continuing to do the same thing and just hoping that it was an off year
Mm-hmm.
is not the answer. You have to evolve. And Marc-Andre Fleury has. And he played more games because Robin Lehner suffered the concussion. But Woody, we're talking about the third winningest goaltender in NHL history. There's only two people who have done it better than Marc-Andre Fleury over the course of his career when it comes to the National Hockey League regular season. And Martin Brodeur and Patrick Roy. And then it's Marc-Andre Fleury surpassing Roberto Luongo.
And as Roberto Luongo said in a quote that he sent to us, couldn't think of there's nobody else in the league that he'd rather have do it, just because of the person that Marc-Andre Fleury has been and remained throughout this. And I think, we've had articles up on the site about just the importance for him of having fun, that character that you can still compete, but if you're not having fun, that's a big part of his game. And honestly, when you see the performance level he's at this age, it's not like he's done right now at third, right? I didn't know that anyone would have a shot at 551. He's definitely got that, depending on the type of team he plays on the rest of the way, and who knows what happens beyond this year. But he's having his best statistical season at 36. We're watching Mike Smith do it at 39. 3-4 more years. If he could get 3-4 more years, and if we could get back to full seasons, and he's on a good team, Marty's out of reach. That seems impossible.
Yeah.
But he could certainly catch Patrick and end up in second place all time. And I think back to Marc-Andre was one of the first guys I covered way back when, his rookie season. I remember being in the locker room in Vancouver, and he'd given up 4 to Marcus Naslund, and he was on his way to the World Junior Tournament later. That it was later that week, or it was one of his last starts before they were going to send him to the World Juniors. And I remember having the conversation in the locker room because he'd given up 4 to Naslund, and that was okay because Naslund also, I think at that time, had one of the scoring records at the World Juniors as well. So there was no shame in Nazi was one of the best shooters in the league at that point with that wrist shot. So there's no shame in it. So to see where he's come from there, and we talk about breaking these guys into putting them in good situations. People forget that was not a good situation for him as a young number 1 overall pick. That was a bad Pittsburgh team he started with, and he didn't allow it to break him, where I think a lot of guys could have been ruined by some of those early experiences playing behind such a terrible team. And I think that mentality is part of why he survived it and has gone on to become one of the best in the history of the game.
Hutch, when you think of Marc-Andre Fleury, what comes to mind? I will say this. I watched him play a game against the Minnesota Wild the other day, and the fun-loving Marc-Andre Fleury was replaced by let's get this done, competitive, battling, jostling with players. It wasn't Jordan Binnington going down the ice and challenging people to scraps, but it was far more competitive than we necessarily would think from Marc-Andre Fleury. So there is that side to him. When things get tense, he gets right into the battle.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point, Darren. And I haven't had the privilege of meeting or covering Marc-Andre the way the two of you have. But I think that's a great characterization, and really talks about the traits that are important to be a goaltender. Have you got that battle? Have you got that commitment? Have you got that fiery competitiveness? And then can you balance it with the mindset that lets you get through some tough times? And of course, we've seen him get angry. It's not like he's smiling 24 hours a day. It's not like he just comes to the rink and he's that silly, relaxed kid on the team and doesn't really care about anything. It's an absolute perfect balance, and one that I have used with many young goaltenders as an example of how they should be. I may have mentioned it on here before. I was on the ice one summer with a major junior goaltender who was just getting angry and getting angry and getting angry. I said, hang on, who'd you tell me your favorite goalie was? Oh, Marc-Andre Fleury. I said, okay, get back in there, do some more reps and smile. And he looked at me like I was crazy. Probably probably 6-7 months later, I got a text message from him just saying, thank you. Thank you. That was actually a huge moment for me, and I'm having a great season now because when things go rough, I start smiling. What a perfect.
Now, did you mention the major junior goaltender just to throw us off as a cover when considering that conversation was actually with Woody?
No, definitely that was not with Woody. I've told him to smile many times before. He just gets more angry. So no, that's sort of, when the scrapper out on the ice, that agitator, when you're getting angry and he just smiles and laughs at you and it makes you even more angry. That's what happens to Woody when you tell him to relax and smile.
Well, two things Flower has not done in his career. One, score a goal, and he is really been focused on it the last couple of years, but not to the point where he's just going to go do it to the adverse effect of the team. But the other one is a goalie fight. He's never had a goalie fight.
Huh?
And I thought maybe there was a chance the other night when things got nasty against the Minnesota Wild, but it didn't come to fruition.
I'm not picking my first ones against Cam Talbot. Thank you very much. Cam takes care of himself in the gym. Yeah, that's not the first guy I'm going after.
All right. Remember the podcast episode with Cam Talbot talking about that? Like you're right. I never thought I wish I would have. The other part was the yellow pads to start, gold pads now. Like there's a fashion element to Marc-Andre Fleury. It kind of goes against the grain a little bit. You see Saros with the yellow, gold, whatever you want to call it, but just a little bit on Marc-Andre Fleury and his setup. Hutch, what do you think from the entire career on through? It's been pretty cool.
Oh, it's been spectacular. We love it. I just can't skip over that bit about him wanting to score. Because did you both see Elvis Merzlikins this week?
Yeah, bravest player in the league, just going over to Torch, say, I'm going to do this. I want you to know, because if I screw up, I just want you to know that I'm going for it. Just told him.
I just was really honest with him. I told him to not freak out if I'm going to mess up, because there was bigger chance that I would mess up. But I didn't really care. Like, I told him I'm going to try to score. So I just give him heads up that even if I mess up and they tie it up and then we lose the game, to not be mad at me. I mean, but that was the only focus what I had, just to score the goal. I cleared all snow on the ice in front of me. I was just waiting for the moment.
I just loved it.
It was awesome. And yet I worry he may never play again.
Yes, that was one of my thoughts.
I mean, I don't know. That's pretty tricky. As well, we might get tied up and we might lose the game because of me. I'm sort of if you're up by 2, everybody should be passing to the goaltender so we can have a fire at the other end of the ice. But man, up by 1, that's a little bit tricky.
So, hey, you guys want a prediction? You guys want a prediction? Mike Smith empty net goal tomorrow night against Vancouver Saturday night.
Okay.
Travis Green has been pulling goalies like 5-6 minutes left. And the Oilers were up. So Mike Smith, if Smitty's in net the first game instead of Koskinen, for sure he's getting a shot because they did it then. Then the next night they were up so far that they didn't bother to pull Thatcher Demko. But if it's a 2-goal game or a 1-goal game, they are pulling early in Vancouver. And I like Mike Smith's eyes must be like saucers, because there's been a couple nights lately where they've had the goalie out with 6.5 minutes left, down 3, and opportunity will be there.
Oh, this is almost the moment. It probably isn't. We'll have to have it for another show. This is almost the moment we got to get Woody riled up because of that coach out there who loves to tell him just because Mike Smith can fire bombs at the other end doesn't mean he's a good puck handler. Should we get him going, Darren?
No. He refuses to bite.
We won't bite. What about Flowers gold pads to the yellow pads?
I love. Well,
I mean, from optometry. An optometrist in the playoffs said that yellow's and that's when he went away from it. And we saw that trend. And I know some people hate it, but I mean, there are NHL goalie coaches that still force their guys away from, solid edges and stuff like that, solid colored edges. Listen, I don't know if you guys remember, but I actually wrote on this when Flower first brought back the gold pads. I had a conversation with him in the locker room here in Vancouver for a story about this whole concept. And he was asking me questions because that was at the same time when Carey had started wearing solid red for a little streak. And he was like, hey, I love Carey's red pads. Do you think he's going to wear them more? Because at that point, and I have the quote somewhere, like Flower said, I love them, but I know I shouldn't, and I'm not sure if I'm going to wear them very much, because he wasn't wearing them all the time back then, and now he is, and clearly it's not had a negative impact on him because he's having a great season. So, but we're just a couple years removed. That might have been, was that 2 years ago or even last season, where the yellow pads weren't full time, and he was hesitant to make them full time because of all these things about solid colors. He was actually asking me, like, hey, what did Kerry say? Like, is he going to go with this? Like, I love it, but there was hesitancy to take that step, and clearly it's gone now.
So here's the story on the gold pads. They were in the rotation 2 years ago, not last year, not the shortened season, the pause year, the year before that. They were then retired, and they were about to be auctioned off as part of the foundation sale. And I don't know how much of a flat spot it was, but Flower was just not rolling to the tune, and things were set out to be signed. Nate Schmidt, now the Vancouver Canucks, walked by the signing table, saw the pads on the table that were going to be auctioned off, grabbed them, and put them in Marc-Andre Fleury's locker, and said, "Hey, you've played great in these things." He'd never lost in them. He was just spot duty 2 years ago with them. But Nate said, you've played great in these things, put them back in. And off the auction table, into his locker, wore them for a practice, and played a game in them, and won, and got his groove back. And since then, it's been the gold pads. Now, he's changed manufacturers, but he's stayed with the gold pads. So Nate Schmidt actually gets credit for putting the gold pads and the fashion sense back into the rotation off the auction table. And he, for those wondering, he'd put one of his game used masks in to replace the pads in the auction. But as crazy as that is,
I'm not surprised. Like I said, there was hesitation. So it goes to show you, all that matters is how you feel. Look good, feel good, play good, whatever it is for you. And I know some guys can't because the coaches won't let them. But if color if style, if fashion is what makes you feel good, if it puts the smile on your face like Marc-Andre Fleury, there you go. That's all the answer. It's whatever makes you feel confident that matters.
We have some great news coming in from Sense Arena VR in our feature interview. We'll talk about that as we set up Sudarshan Maharaj, the goaltending coach with the Anaheim Ducks, Sudsy. But right now it's the gear segment, and Marc-Andre Fleury's wearing True, and the True 12.2 line is now in store. I know we've talked about it before, but they have the hands on the merchandise. Let's get over to Cam and company at the Hockey Shop, source for Sports Surrey, thehockeyshop.com. Great job over there as Woody and Cam chat about True 12.2.
Welcome back to the Hockey Shop, source for sports. I'm here in Goalie Utopia with Cam Matwiv, and Goalie Utopia just got a little bit brighter. I know we've already talked about the new True line, powered by Lefebvre a couple weeks ago. When they launched the customizer, let you know that you could order them already from Cam. But at that time, we thought we might be a few months away from actually having inventory in store. Well, guess what? As you can see, we no longer have to Photoshop it in. Cam has his inventory, which means if you have questions about the new True line, he's got the 12.2 in stock. If you happen to be lucky enough, like us, to live in the Lower Mainland, you can come visit him in person at the Hockey Shop, source for sports here in Surrey. Get your hands on it. You know, check the flex, feel the glove, feel the blocker, really get a feel for this gear. The other good thing is that means Cam's gotten a better feel for this gear. So if you're not blessed enough to be able to sort of come and check it out in person, he's better equipped to answer your questions. It's more than just a catalog. It's an actual real feel for him now. So once again, the place to come if you've got questions about the True gear by Lefebvre, Cam Matwiv at the Hockey Shop. And let's just walk through it again really quickly here. We highlighted some of the features before. Let's show off a little bit of the, like, for example, the flex and feel of the 12.2 pad.
Yeah, so again, we have our two sample sets here. So just to iterate too as well, I have something for you to touch and hold. Right now, these are staying in the store, though. They're not going to be for sale at this current moment. I should have some more general stock kind of arriving closer to about September. That all said, back to the pad. So flexibility-wise, start off with that boot, because that's something that basically everybody has said or mentioned since we've had these in. Very, very flexible boot, something more so than you've been used to in the past. The good news about that is that that'll really help you in a reverse V8 situation or even a V8 situation. That's helping you get over top of your pad, getting you better balance so you're able to catch that edge and push off, as opposed to the pad shooting up your leg as you go to go do that. It's flexing with you, staying on the top of the boot of the skate and allowing you to kind of get over top.
Yeah, and really important, especially if you're a goaltender that likes to wear their pads tight and really sort of fit firmly to the leg so that that pad is moving with your leg rather than around it. You can sort of maintain that tight connection in the bottom of the boot through the shin. And like as Cam said, that pad's still going to give you the flexibility at the bottom to sort of load up those pushes with the pad sort of staying in place rather than having to slide around and move around your leg. So it'll move with your leg a little more. Some of the other features, pretty stiff.
That's
the thigh rise.
Yes. So a couple different options as you're ordering custom. This one we set to single break but stiff upper top. Just kind of following more in line with the trends that some of the other pads that are out on the wall. Quite stiff, but that gives you good rigidity and also will aid in the seal of the pad as you actually are down into the butterfly position.
Okay, we talked about the new fast rotation system last time, but we couldn't really show it off other than some stock photos we had. Now we can.
Open up the back of this pad. We do have the fast rotation system. So like I said, again, to me, like it almost looks like a reverse knee brace. It's quite close. That said, you do have that adjustability in terms of how tight you do want it. That said, even at its kind of loosest setting, it is fairly on the snug side of things, and that's what it's supposed to do. I found even with like what I would consider bigger than your average calf, it still tends to sit right. It doesn't really have that ride up feature that some of these pads do have now with that, like their different rotation systems and whatnot. That said, great connection to the pad, great response out of the pad so far in terms of initial feedback, plus even just messing around in the store myself. Definitely worth checking out. However, if you don't want it, you do have the ability to order with just 2 leather straps, and then that would get deleted. But you'd be kind of missing out on one of the cooler features.
Really quick, gloves, blockers. Not much has changed in terms of the options that are available. I know you have 2 here in store to check out in terms of feel. Obviously, you can see by the way that pocket folds over. Clearly, I have a 580 on my hand. The other glove we have here, I'll let Cam close this one, is a 590, more of a straight line break. You can also order it in the 600. Those are kind of the traditional break points that we saw when Lefebvre was making gear for CCM. To me, that feel and those break points are all kind of maintained here.
That's correct. Yeah, this shouldn't feel like a departure if you're already used to, those previous Lefebvre gloves that have existed in the past. You should find a comfortable home. Internals feel very, very close and identical. Same thing with that 580 closure. Again, 600 is available. Just didn't order it at this current time, but I believe we do have some coming in for that September date. 2 different options for the blocker.
I was going to say, well, the one you've got over on your side has some binding on it. This one is more of a bindingless design. What are some of the other options you can get with your blocker?
That said, basically completely identical blockers beyond the binding itself. That's straight versus curved finger protection. Curved is currently featured on this one as well. I believe that one has it as well. Again, if you're used to those CCM blockers, used to those old previous Lefebvre blockers, this isn't going to feel too much different. You still have the option of the full piece cuff or the half piece cuff. Both of these have the full. Very easy to get the blocker in front of you to provide that good face forward position. Again, that good familiar feeling gear. So if you're already used to it, here's your chance to get it again.
Okay, so as he said, if you're in the area, you can come by, check it out, get hands-on, and really give it a good feel. If you're not, Cam's can answer all your questions. There are different ordering options for custom. As he said, he'll have stock retail versions in store later on this summer. But for now, at least, you can get your hands on it. I know a lot of you have been waiting, and Cam is better equipped even more than before to answer your questions. So make sure, if you've got questions, where can they get a hold of you?
604-589-8299.
And the 1-800 number for our U.S. clients? International?
1-800-567-7790.
Well done. He's got it memorized, folks. All right. Whether it's custom order, wait times now, like this arrived faster than you expected? Have we seen the wait times bump up if you're going full custom?
Give me a call. We'll talk about it.
All right. We'll leave it at that, but there will be some more in store. The new True by Lefebvre, you've seen it in the NHL. Now you can get your hands on it in person here at the Hockey Shop.
Thanks, Kevin.
True 12.2 kind of rhymes. I think we should keep it. Like 12.3 has to stay on the back burner for a while. 12.2 by True. Just from announcer speak.
Yeah, but then later on you'll say 12.3. It's the one for me.
Oh, well done. Okay, 12.3 is back in. Let's go. Let's roll that off. True 12.2. They've really taken hold. We haven't seen that kind of transition from the bubble last year right on through the dominance by a manufacturer and the transition by a lot of goaltenders. This week in our feature interview, brought to you by Sense Arena VR, we have the goaltending coach of the Anaheim Ducks. But before we get to Sudarshan Maharaj, good old Sudsy, we have a lot going on with the Sense Arena skills competition and a lot happening with Sense Arena VR. Hutch.
Absolutely. Big week for Sense Arena, big week for InGoal, at least as a partner of theirs in support of what they're up to. First thing I'll say is Sunday, in a day or two after we're recording this and posting it, your shot at a great deal on Sense Arena will be shutting down. So you've got a couple more days to grab Sense Arena and get your annual license for 50% off. Obviously, that's a big savings there. Great opportunity for people who want to get into Sense Arena. You've heard us talk about it on the show, and many of our guests talk about it, and it really is a game changer for goaltenders everywhere. So great chance to get involved. And if you do, you can hop on board with the first Sense Arena Skills Challenge, which began this week. And there's a different challenge for 5 weeks, each week a different challenge that you can participate in. And they will be selecting a winner each week, the top score from all the competitors. And then amongst those 5 weekly winners and 11 more people, they will have a final for 16 goaltenders. And the winner of the final will get $1,000 towards their training.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's huge. $100 for each weekly winner, and then a T-shirt as well for all the finalists. It's a lot of fun. You take on this challenge, which shows up. I think we've talked here before how Sense Arena has training plans. You put on the headset, you go into the training plan area, and you can walk through things that have been put together by Brian DeCord, our guest on the podcast the other day, Maria Mountain, who's a good friend of the show. Lots of different programs in there, but one of them is the skills competition for the week, and it takes you through something like a dozen drills, and then you get an overall score, and you can actually go to their web interface and see how you stack up. A little over 100 people have taken advantage of it this week. There's also a social media component to increase your score if you're not maybe doing quite as well as you wanted to in the competition. You can post some photos or videos. Just a lot of fun to get involved with and see how you stack up against goaltenders all around the world. And I'll say that, if you're a younger goaltender, you can use Sense Arena and you can set it at your level so that you're facing shooters a little bit more like you're used to seeing on the ice. The skills competition, because they're trying to pick sort of the best of the best, you're facing the best shooters that they have in these drills. But what a fun way to see how you stack up against everybody.
Wow. So how are you doing?
I am having a great time watching my son. Yeah, he's enjoying it.
I'm telling you, the 1 week, you don't have to do all 5 weeks, but 1 week you and Woody have to square off and go head to head. Just not for competition in the big picture, but competition within our group.
Well, let's wait a week. Hutch has got a lot on his plate right now. I got a lot on my plate right now.
Let's wait 5 weeks.
We'll hop in there. We'll have an in-goal competition, and maybe it'll be an expanded one as well. So we'll get that going.
I can't wait to see Sense Arena VR incorporate the snapping a stick against the crossbar for Woody. That'll be the Woody element to it.
Yeah, hopefully I do better than Mikko Koskinen did last night after giving up 4-on-4. It took him 2 whacks. Never good when it takes you 2 whacks. Listen, there's another part to this Sense Arena thing too. If you're new to it or you haven't had a chance to join, there's a special, and that's actually the contest is running for 5 weeks. The special ends this week. Make sure you check out our social channels. We sent an email out to all our subscribers and members. You can save 50% off the subscription price for those of you that actually have Oculus or Oculus 2 headsets already, so you don't need to buy the hardware, or you can just buy the box and the attachments for gloves. In terms of the extra hardware from Sense, you can get the actual subscription service for a year for 50% off. And the code on that, Hutch, is IGM. Help me out here.
Is posted at ingoalmag.com. If you go to our site, it's IGM off 50, IGMOFF 50. But if you just go to ingoalmag.com, top right, you'll see a link to the story that has all the details for you.
A quick question. Do you think Sense Arena will have an impact to help goaltenders stay on their edges more when they transition to the ice? So you're going through the exercises, and a lot of times maybe you don't have the pads on while you're doing the VR. When you transition onto the ice, will you be more adept, more apt to stay on your feet? Just, I don't know whether that's true or not, but I thought I'd ask the question.
Certainly something you can experiment with a bit more in there. Yeah.
I mean, if it's helping teach you patience off a release, then that is the very definition of holding your edges and being more patient. So I think it's certainly an aspect. Let me tell you, I wasn't planning on doing this today, but you guys reminded me of this. Not to go all overboard on Sense, but I got a direct message on Twitter from a dad whose kid's been using it. Jason Holtvote. Oh man, just probably butchered that. Jason, my apologies.
Holtvote, yeah.
Just wanted to send you a quick note. We bought Sense Arena for our 13-year-old son 2 months ago, and he trains with it regularly. How far his hands and puck reading have come in the last 2 months is incredible. I see Sense Arena being the largest advancement in goaltending maybe ever. You will see the consistency of goalies in the next years growing so much that there will be calls for smaller equipment and larger nets getting louder and louder. Scoring in the NHL will drop considerably in about 5 years as all these 12 and 15-year-olds get there. Can't say enough about the difference it's made in his game in terms of teaching how to read a shot. It's helped him more than he ever could. And he closed and saying, unfortunately, any goalie who isn't using this right now is getting behind. It's an absolute game changer. That's just unprovoked, unprompted. Someone needed to let me know from a parent, like the impact he's seen as Hutch's son has told him it's a cheat code. Clearly other parents are seeing that impact as well. And like I said, you can use the IGM off 50 code right now to get half off your subscription to Sense Arena.
That is awesome to hear. What a great testimonial for Sense Arena. Also interesting, next time the equipment gets reduced in size, just email Bob Tativa at sensearena.com and he'll be the guy you can complain to when your pads get reduced to 10 inches in width. Just speaking of parents, I know we got to get into this feature interview in a second. Just a bug I'll put in your ears, guys, because you did this for us last week, Darren. We also got a message through our DMs on Instagram from another parent, Ryan Shields, who said, I'm about to go on a road trip with my son. I need to know what's your pick for the top 10 podcasts to listen to of your top 10 InGoal episodes. So, of course, we all think of the feature interview when we're picking our top 10. So we're not going to do it off the top of our head right now, but the feature interview is the thing we all relate to. So as we head into this one, guys, maybe we can have a little think for next week who some of your top ones are, and we can maybe put a little top 10 list for Ryan and the other parents hitting the road this summer.
Episode 1 for sure. For sure. That was spectacular.
I suffer from recency bias because I'm not that bright and I can't think that far, like last week's tough for me.
So you're going this week?
The one we're about to listen to, Sudsy is one of my favorite. This is one of the best conversations I've had. Like I
say that every
I know
week.
I say
Isn't
that a lot.
Awesome.
No, and Renee Desbiens was awesome last week too, and obviously we had Brian DeCord was great too. But there are so many different elements that Sudsy touches on in this one that I use the words must listen. Let's be honest, we have NHL goalie departments that tell us that they make InGoal Radio must listen for all their prospects. So I don't throw must listen around. Well, okay, I throw it around a lot, but this one is legit in that must listen category.
I'll toss out the Jeremy Swayman interview. I didn't know Jeremy Swayman from Adam before you guys talked to him, and Woody. That conversation set the table, and now we're watching Jeremy Swayman in the National Hockey League. So,
Guys, I said next week.
Okay, sorry, we got distracted.
Excited.
All right, I'll do it. So we have to have 10.
Yeah, or maybe I can figure out, because we all love all of them. I'm going to have to now use my math brain and go figure out if Ryan and his son listen to all 118 episodes of InGoal Radio, how far do they have to drive?
Depends if they skip through the Woody rant.
Yeah, they'll have to go around Lake Superior twice, and then you should be able to get through it.
Next week, let's have 3 each next week to build Ryan a top 9 anyway.
Okay. I'm taking episode 1, just so you know. Okay?
We can live with that.
Thank you. All right. This week's feature interview brought to you by Sensorina. Sensorina VR is a guy that's been around the game for a long time and had some incredible experiences. And now he is the head coach of the Anaheim Ducks and just went through the roller coaster of having to somewhat say goodbye to one of his goaltenders. Not official yet until the end of the season, but the announcement from Ryan Miller that he's going to retire. Sudarshan Maharaj is the goalie coach of the Anaheim Ducks, formerly with the New York Islanders, a Toronto area guy, but grew up in Trinidad. Actually, moved to Canada when he was 5-6 years old. So there's a lot to get into, and never mind his European experiences. This is a great one, an awesome conversation about the technical side of the game, the mental side of the game, and the human part of hockey and goaltending. Sudsy. Sudarshan Maharaj on InGoal Radio, the podcast.
Really pleased to be welcomed on the InGoal Radio podcast by Sudarshan Maharaj, goaltending coach of the Anaheim Ducks. I almost said Mighty Ducks because I almost did because the show's back on. At the end of a tough year for you guys, but we want to talk to you about your career, about your path, coaching, playing, all those things. But I figured we'd start with sort of what's going on right now and a goaltender that I grew to really love here in Vancouver and appreciated all my time getting to talk to him. Ryan Miller's going to hang it up after this year, and he's playing his last couple of games. What jumps to mind from your time coaching Ryan Miller over the past few seasons in Anaheim?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the program. I've listened to quite a number of the episodes and enjoyed it. The first would be the thing I think of when I think of Ryan is what a consummate professional he is. His routines for getting prepared for when he's playing, his routines for getting prepared for when he's not playing, for overcoming long periods of inactivity in terms of backing up, John Gibson will sometimes run 3 or 4 games in a row, sometimes 5. And watching and being a part of Ryan's routine really was a great learning experience for me. And also, I say to Ryan all the time, yes, I am his coach, but I'm also a fan of Ryan. And I really enjoy watching how he navigates through his seasons. And so this one in particular was really an enjoyable one in terms of it was such an odd, weird construction of a season that watching him manipulate those twists and turns was really enjoyable. And again, I like to say I like to, as much as I coach my goalies, I like to learn from them as well. And there's been over the years, I've learned quite a lot from Ryan. I hope he can say the same for me.
Is there anything that jumps out, like from a philosophy standpoint for him? And I mean, he's been around long enough that he's touched different points in the evolution of the position. I remember talking to him about when he was younger, like there was a lot of extra movement in his game and how some of his early coaches in junior, the idea of being square and to get some of that movement out. And yet even later in his career, he's still a goalie who talked about, dictating a little bit, showing shooters one thing, sort of trying to, almost influence what players were going to do attacking him in the way he presented to them. And that, I don't know if that's a lost art completely, but it feels like it's definitely a disappearing art.
There's no question it is a disappearing art, and you'll hear him. He references setting traps all the time when you're speaking to Ryan, and in certain scenarios. The other night, in his final home game there in Anaheim, there was a play in particular where one of the LA Kings came down and he went short side high, and it was like Ryan might as well have been standing there with a notebook behind the guy because he knew where it was going, and he just stuck his hand up, made the spectacular glove save. But to him, it was so easy because he had dictated where the play was going. So there's no question he loves the psychological element of that, and the positive of that is that it really did allow him to, as you said, dictate a lot of the outcomes. The drawback of that is if it doesn't go as he scripted it, it can cause all kinds of issues. So and it was fun to watch him, as I said, navigate through all of that.
Now, with all that experience, like how do you, like you said, you're learning from him. Obviously, he's learning from you. And you've got two other younger goaltenders there with you, especially this year with three guys around, Anthony Stolarz, John Gibson, an all-American trio. How much like learning off of a guy like him can they do, or do you have to be careful because so much of what he does, for lack of a better term, is almost innate. It's a learned thing that he's done over his career. And I don't know how much of that is teachable or translatable, but do you see it? Do you see some of it sort of start to, those habits start to get picked up by the other guys? And how do you navigate in between those things?
Oh, for sure. We were doing, Ryan every once in a while loves to do breakaways just to stay sharp at the end of practice. And Anthony was in that for one of those sessions, and he was struggling a particular day with it. And Ryan came over and the three of us stood there, and Ryan said, here's how I handle mine. And I said, well, here's what I'm seeing. And Anthony sort of took the best out of the both things that we were presenting to him, went back in the net and flushed it out, and so there's a wealth of experience there. I know at times there'll be a goal when it will go in. Gibson the other day let one in, and there were a couple of choices he could have made on it. And he walked over to Ryan as I was entering the dressing room after the game, and the two of them were talking over the goal. And so there's no question the other goaltenders would often go to Ryan as well and say, hey, what do you think of this? What do you thought I could have done on that goal? And so there's no question that both Anthony and John both rely on that experience from time to time.
Now, what about yourself in terms of philosophies? And I was going to save philosophies for later, but it seems like a perfect time to sort of talk about it. In terms of those discussions you just described, I love the way you set that up. Like it's a back and forth, it's a give and take, it's a learning process, as opposed to, this is the way we're doing it, and dictating, more teaching than telling, I guess it would be one way of putting it. And I know that's a big part of your philosophy. And yet there are probably times where you have to go the other way. Like, hey, listen, this way is better. We've got the proof. Where's your philosophy on that? How has it evolved over the years? How much of this is the back and forth, and how much is it knowing when that there are some things that are sort of hard and fast rules?
There was a time when I came in, entered the league way back in 2003. There was a trend at that point towards the blocking goalies, and there were some very definitive hard and fast rules about how you were playing at that time. And I came in, I joined the Islanders then, and I had a 6'5", elderly goalie in Garth Snow, a 5'6", 5'7" guy in Wade Dubowitz, and a 22-year-old or 21-year-old Rick DiPietro, all vastly different goaltenders, vastly different in size, in attitude, in work ethic, in thought processes, everything. I mean, you couldn't find three more polar opposites than those three guys. And I remember standing there thinking, okay, how are we going to play this out? And I had always been a believer that one size doesn't fit all, that there are certain things that you have to do well. All NHL goalies in my mind have to be good skaters. End of story. Can you work around that? Sure, there are different levels of skating of NHL goalies. There are certain guys that aren't particularly great skaters that have had very good careers. So from my in terms of my philosophy is, I'm a firm believer that you have to find the strengths of each guy and build upon those strengths, because those are the things that give those guys confidence. When they're the things that they do naturally and they do well are often the thing that is a part of their mojo. As a big blues music guy, I always feel that every goalie has their own fingerprint, and that's their mojo. And if you attack or you change that, then you run the risk of derailing your own goaltender. And so for me, there's a real process where I will study that new goaltender that we brought in. I'll give an example, a real life example in Anthony Stolarz. Looking at going back and watching video of Anthony in Philadelphia, going back and watching video of Anthony in Edmonton, watching him through the American League last year. There were some definitive things that I had, some images that I had of Anthony in my mind of what I thought we could work on and what we could improve. But more importantly, I had to hear what Anthony's vision was. And once we sort of sat down and went over that, I flew to Philadelphia and met him in Philadelphia when we signed him. And we went out for lunch, and I sort of listened to his view of his career and his game. And then I told him what I saw and what I felt were the areas that I thought we could help him work towards. And then sort of together mesh that into an image that worked for both of us. That being said, sometimes as a coach, you hear things and you think, I don't know how correct that is. I'm seeing it this way. But in the end, goals are the ultimate teachers, right? And so if you leave it long enough in practice or in games, sometimes when those goals go in, there's your opportunity, there's your teachable moment. And so I like to work on that format. It's not immediate sometimes. It's not draconian by any sense. But it is, and there is, for me, a really important element of making sure that the guys have ownership in the development of their own game.
Are there any non-negotiables in there? And actually, maybe you don't want to share them, but are there certain things where it's just, we got to have this?
There's no question. I am fanatical about our goalies' hands. I'm fanatical about it. It drives me absolutely around the bend when I have goalies that drop pucks or don't get their hands active enough. In terms of not just catching pucks, but in utilizing their hands to make sure that their rebound control is maximized. So I am that is the one finicky part of my style that I like to develop, is that I like our guys to have good hands. That being said, I'm also big on goalies that are good skaters.
I mean, especially the way the game's going now, there's so much east-west. If you can't move in today's game, I'm not sure you can play anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you talked about hands, and you shared a story with me a while back, just casually chit-chatting, so I hope it's okay if I introduce this, and you just cut me off, and we'll ask Hutch to edit this if we need be, but if it's okay, you told me a story about having some European goaltenders in camp and just going out, and we talk about physical literacy and hands and things, and just, I can't remember if it was a baseball or a football, but you guys just went out and threw a ball around. Is that okay to share that story?
Yeah, absolutely. We drafted over the last few years, we've drafted 3 European goaltenders, a Swede, a Czech, and a Slovak. And during development camps, I was taken aback by A, their hand positions, but B, just the fact that they didn't utilize their hands to the maximum. And so after every practice, in particular, one of the goaltenders, I would I would take him out into the parking lot, and I bought baseball gloves for all three of them, and I would take this one in particular, and we would go play grounders outside, and insist on him handling grounders. Then I'd insist on him catching, just a regular throw. Then I'd insist on him catching crossbody. Then I'd insist on him catching pop flies, and with the pure intent that it freed up his catcher. He didn't hold it and carry it as far back as he had when we drafted him, and he became more nimble with his hands. He was able to manipulate his hands so that he could change the angle of the pocket, so that he wasn't getting as many pucks in his palm. He was getting more in his pocket because a back catcher wouldn't survive if he didn't catch everything in his pocket, or as many in his pocket as he could. So I want our guys to develop those nimble hands, almost like a back catcher. And then, eventually, once we got the three guys out there playing 500, the old baseball game, 500, you had to catch the pop flies. They also learned about timing of catches and things like that. And then our assistant equipment guy used to work for a minor league baseball team, and could hit grounders for about 3.5 days straight without breaking a sweat. And so we took them out into the field. Our equipment guy hammered grounders, and they chased them all over the field and had a hoot doing it. And so it was a great lesson for the three of them, and we had a lot of fun, and it broke up the monotony of sticking them on the ice and shooting pucks at them.
Well, it's funny because there's obviously just the raw natural eye-hand coordination element to that. And like you said, you have to catch it in the pocket there.
Yeah.
But is there also sort of, and I may have been Dusty Emu, I remember telling me about this, because he's big on hands and catching too, but that sort of cradling it, the idea that you don't just stick it out there to catch, that there's sort of, and with baseball, and especially with grounders, as a guy who grew up playing ball myself, like that, that sort of short hop as a shortstop, sort of like not just sticking it out there to block it, but sort of almost cradling it and cushioning it into you and sort of staying on top of it like that. Is there correlation there? Like not just that you get it in the pocket, but how you catch?
Absolutely. And it's part and parcel of the fact that the hands don't work independent of the body. The hands work in unison with the body. And so that idea of cradling a grounder is not very far off the idea of moving into a shot, of absorbing, a rocket of a slap shot, by the way that you adjust your hands. And so for sure, any type of kinesthetic awareness like that, I think is a huge element.
Now, the other element you talked about with Anthony was his vision of his game and your vision of his game, and that communication is part of it building a common language and dictionary, because so many guys use different phrases over the years. Is it having that sit down and making sure that when you use the words, you're both describing the same thing? Is that part of the process with a new guy, making sure you're on the same page?
Absolutely. And one of the things that has happened over the years is we have overcomplicated, my belief is we've overcomplicated goaltending. We've created these absolutely outlandish phrases for simple maneuvers. and so one of the things, the nicest compliment any goaltender has ever paid to me was Jason LaBarbera. And I was we had him when I was the development guy, and we had him in San Diego. And I was his 14th goalie coach in 15 years. And so he had heard it all. He had heard every terminology, every philosophy, all of it. And one day we were in practice, and he turned to me and he said, "My God, says, you teach the simplest goal of any coach I've ever had. You make it sound so simple." And I thought, okay, that was a nice compliment. That was a compliment, because I've really, over the years, tried to strip down how I teach and what I teach to the simplest elements. And the game has gotten so fast. Complicating it is counterproductive and counterintuitive to what we're trying to achieve. And so there's no question. I once we get speaking about things, none of us in Anaheim, any of the goalies, will use anything more complicated than an RVH. That'll be it. There's no zone of proximal disfiguration or whatever, these terms that come up where the puck is 6 inches to the right, so it entered the zone of proximal mind bend. That stuff doesn't exist. That is just done to make ourselves look smart. And in reality, it's actually complicated things. And so we really focus on, in this scenario, this is what we're trying to do. If we are trying to influence a player, we're doing it this way. And, it's all we try to keep it as simple and as straightforward as possible. When you look, there was a great book written a few years ago called The Physics of Ice Hockey. And it was fantastic. It was by a university professor. I think it was University of New Brunswick, if I'm not mistaken, or physics of hockey, I think it was. And he went over certain things. And one of the chapters, he looked at how quickly a goaltender must react to a shot from just inside the blue line. And you're looking at it's down to point, so 0.2 seconds, 0.4 seconds, things like that, when he literally has to read the play and begin to react. In my mind, as goaltending coaches, we have created more haze there because we've started to put these terms and these ideas and these philosophies into play instead of focusing on doing what we need to do, and that is to simplify in those scenarios. And so we very much, when we speak, we use very simple terms, and we keep the concepts ABC, and work from there.
Well, I apologize for that. Sometimes we got to come up with terms to sell the magazine here, Sadzi. So, but it is interesting to hear you say that, because do you see young goalies coming in and almost to the point where with all that information, you can almost see the hamster and the wheel spinning up there. And I always like to quote the phrase from Top Gun, which makes me old, but if you think out there, you're dead. Do you see kids coming in overthinking?
Exactly. And I remember when the RVH started to become a really popular thing. You'd see a player coming down the wing, and I still see this. I scout still for the Ducks, so I see a lot of the amateur goalies, and you see a guy coming down the wing, and you can see the goaltender cheating to his post so he can plant his foot, so he can start the RVH process. Well, the guy's at the top of the circle. and it drifts one far side and beats him top shelf, and the kids left there standing going, what went wrong? And so sometimes when we teach technique, we don't teach the proper utilization of those techniques, and that to me is an issue. I think in order for us to do favors for our goaltenders, they have to understand why they're doing it. Not just how to do it. They need to understand the utilization, the proper utilization, and the proper, and have a real sound understanding of when and when not to, based on their skill set, as opposed to a genetic. Well, you never do it here. Well, it may work for some guys here, So it's a matter of finding where that sweet spot is for each guy, where you can utilize it, and others that can't.
That's the beauty of this position. That's why I love it, right? There is no one answer. There is no one size fits all answer for anything really in this position.
Exactly.
Okay, so I want to get back into the roots a little bit. Like, how'd you become a goaltender? I know your originally parents are from, and you immigrated from Trinidad and Tobago. Introduced to the game at a young age. End up going and playing York University, if I'm correct. Yes. And then Sweden. So how'd you fall in love with the game first? What drew you A, to hockey, and B to goaltending?
I'm old enough to predate the internet, and so what was the thing that Canadian kids did on Wednesday night and Saturday nights when I was a kid? You watched Hockey Night in Canada, and you went out and you played street hockey, and my older brother absolutely loved Bernie Perrant. Absolutely loved Bernie Perrant. And so I had to be a goalie because he told me so. and I had to play like Bernie Perrant. And so you join the local house league, playing ball hockey on the street with the kids as a goalie. And fell in love with the position. And I was also a goaltender in lacrosse for a lot of years, and had wanted to be a pro lacrosse goalie before I wanted to be a pro NHL goalie. And when I was about 13, pro lacrosse in Canada had faded, had gone away. And so at that point, I thought, well, I guess I have to be a pro hockey goalie then, because they didn't have pro lacrosse. But I was playing at the same time. I was playing both at the same time. Just happened to love lacrosse more at that time. And then eventually, obviously, continued on from there.
We've heard players over the years. I know, like guys like John Tavares have talked about, he's got family that played lacrosse, playing lacrosse growing up, and the hands and the eye-hand coordination and how important that is to their skill sets as young athletes. Is there any tie-in for the goaltenders? I'll be honest with you, I haven't watched enough. Like, it's such a different game. I've never thought about that from a goaltending standpoint. I mean, I know the upper body equipment is huge and that little ball must hurt like crazy. But beyond that, is it the eye hand? Is there anything else that ties in, you think?
The funny part is I would almost break my hand at the start of every season because I'd actually try to catch the ball and you couldn't. You wear player's gloves. And so I'd almost break my hand first practice of every season. But it really helped my tracking, my visual tracking, because the velocity that that the lacrosse ball is coming at compared to, as a kid, a slap shot and a white lacrosse ball at that. So your eyes really, you learn to track very well as a lacrosse goalie. Stylistically, there are vast differences and all those things, excuse me. But in terms of tracking, it was massively helpful. And then, funny enough, watching David Riddick's warm-up where he takes the 2 shots in the head at the end of the morning skate, that is an actual drill for lacrosse goalies, because what you can't do as a lacrosse goalie is you can't blink when you're about to get hit in the head because of lacrosse fakes. Guy fakes. If you blink, he fakes and he shoots it around you. So you can't ever blink as a ball is coming towards your head. You have to watch it come into your head in case as a lead up because of fakes. So little things like that were massively helpful.
Oh, the visual especially. So 13, you said you made that decision. At what point, as that road from 13 to playing university hockey to I'm going to play pro, any goalie coaching back then? Because I don't think there really were, there wasn't a lot of active goalie coaching. Clearly the position has changed so much now. Everybody's got a goalie coach at age 8 and up. What was your experiences with learning? Was it just watching Bernie Perrant on TV and picking up idiosyncrasies there? Did you have any mentors at an early age?
No, we had none. I had an old dog-eared copy of Jacques Plante's goaltending manual, which went out of print, I think, in about 1902. But it was something. And I literally dog-eared every page of that manual. I went to one goalie school later on. I think maybe when I was about 16, was the first one I'd ever gone to. My parents weren't particularly well-to-do, and so money wasn't something that we threw around lightly. And A, there weren't any goalie schools, and B, when hockey schools and goalie coaching did start, we certainly didn't have the money to take part in all of that. So watching, listening, and learning through experience were the 3 ways that you learned, and I really wished I had access that these kids have to coaching now, because it's wonderful. Some of a lot of the resources that these kids have, positively and unfortunately, I think as we see what's going on around the world with goalie coaching, there's some positive elements to that, and there's some negative elements to that. There are some things that I think that are you walk through hockey camps or through arenas and you see different hockey schools, and sometimes you cringe because some of the things that you see, aren't helping the kids, and that's not to say that I will ever claim to have all the answers, because I certainly don't. But I can tell you, I know certain things that don't work, and you cringe sometimes when you walk by and see some of those camps and you see some of the things that were being taught out there, and you think, "Ooh, that's not going to help that kid, that young lad or that young girl."
Do you worry at all too about, it's funny because you talked about, these are drafted prospects and you're buying baseball gloves and taking them out in the yard for grounders. And yet here we are at very young ages, goalies are just goalies. Sometimes at, 10, 11, 12, almost year round, and they're not playing baseball and they're not, all these things that you're trying to add at NHL prospect level. And it feels sometimes, and not all the time, but it feels like sometimes we're taking away those opportunities from kids because they feel like they'll miss out if they're not in goalie camp and spring hockey and all those different things every single year at a young age.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a simple burnout element of things. You're doing the same thing from the age of 6 to into your, to 19. There can be a burnout element. There's no question. You talk to sports psychologists, you see different sports physiologists, things like that, and they all talk about transference and the beautiful element of teaching, of learning another sport so you improve at a different sport. Gretzky always talked about he learned how to roll off checks because he played lacrosse. So he learned how to spin off checks because of lacrosse. I'm of that vintage where Adam Oates and Joe Newendijk all played lacrosse at the same time that I did, and you see the hand-eye coordination that it developed in those guys. Some of the teams that I played with, we had a number of guys that went on to have decent hockey careers, but we also had a number of guys that went on to do other sports. One of whom went on to play in the NFL. Some of them went on to play baseball and at high levels, and so. There's no question, I think, that we are missing out a little bit on that transference, for sure.
Now, some of them went on to NFL. Some of them went on to play pro hockey in Sweden. How did that come about, the opportunity for you to go from York to Sweden? Were there other pro opportunities over here? And what was the experiences like over there? And like 6 years pro, it wasn't a short stay for you. You were over there for a while.
Yeah, it was, I knew from a very young age, I don't think I am good enough to play in the NHL. Once I got to a certain age, I thought, you know what? There are guys that are better than I am, and these guys are going to play in the NHL. But I think I'm good enough to play in Europe in certain areas, and got an opportunity. Literally hunted around. Back then, you didn't have agents and all those things, and hunted around with some European teams. Ended up by luck. Finding a guy in Norway who knew somebody in Sweden who was looking for a goaltender, flew over to Sweden, sat on my hockey bag till they came to get me at the airport. I went on a 2-week tryout, basically. After a week, they offered me a contract, flew home, got my work visa, and then ended up changing teams a few times, but stayed in Sweden for 6 years and absolutely loved it. To this day, we have quite a number of Swedes in Anaheim, and to this day, none of the Swedish players speak to me in English. They all speak to me in Swedish.
I'd heard you speak it. That could be an advantage in the recruiting process these days. There's a lot of Swedish goaltenders.
Absolutely. And, when I was with the Islanders, we drafted Anders Nilsson, and we barely ever spoke in English to each other. We currently have Ole Eriksson who's a Swedish goaltender playing in San Diego with our farm team. Again, quite often our conversations will be in Swedish, and so it was not only was it a great hockey experience, it was a great life experience. I was 21 years old, from a conservative Trinidadian background, and suddenly here I am in this incredible socialist country in Sweden. And it's funny, here in North America, the word socialism is a taboo in certain places, and yet, if you actually see a country like Sweden or the Scandinavian countries in general, how they operate, it's fine-tuned machinery in a lot of areas with that. So politically, socially, and from a life experience, it was a fantastic opportunity.
No, it's I'm a little jealous because Thomas Magnuson has a podcast that I always wish there was a translation available for, the head of the Swedish Federation, because I'd like to be able to listen in. You can listen in on that. They've done such a good job from a development standpoint in terms of, programs to build out. I love that their goalie programs are not about just focusing on the elite athletes, but about creating more goalie coaches at youth levels. And I love that approach. I know they do a lot of webinars and seminars and stuff. Are you able to you could actually tune in and listen to those? I'm jealous because I would like to tune in and listen to those, but I don't understand a word.
Yeah, it's funny. Depending on where the person's from, just like North America, there are certain accents and dialects. Hampus Lindholm, who plays for us in Anaheim, is from southern Sweden, which has a very, very strong dialect. Whereas we have a couple of players that are from northern Sweden who also have a different type of dialect. So sometimes when they get going, my head spins. I can't quite follow along. And of course the guys, Raquel and some of the other guys and Silverberg and those guys will get a good laugh out of it because they have trouble understanding them too. So I don't feel so bad.
So you come back from Sweden and you don't come back to a career in goalie coaching right away. You came back and did some teaching. That experience as a teacher and the work you've put in to become a teacher and that career, and also, as I understand it, so you work with some kids who were in challenging situations. How do you think that benefited you? And I actually don't even mean to put it that way, but how do those experiences help form who you are as a goaltending coach? Because I think sometimes there can be, for some guys, a difference between coach and teacher. Teaching is not something everyone does naturally. It's something that you can learn. There are ways to teach.
Absolutely.
And I wonder, those two worlds.
Yeah. It was going through the process of Teachers College. There were some great elements of Teachers College, and there were some things that were from a theoretical standpoint were great things that I could transfer into coaching. I started teaching in the fourth grade. Then I started to teach middle school behavior classes, and I became an itinerant behavior consultant for the Toronto District School Board. And so we were working with, we had 35 schools that we oversaw, and we worked with kids from grades 1 through 8 with behavioral difficulties. And then we also had a learning center where we had kids from grades 5 through 8 that had more difficulties with their behavior. So we would bring them in on a temporary basis for an 8-week period, where we would try to give them the strategies to survive in a regular classroom. But we also worked with kids in youth detention and gangs and tried to get them back into school. And at that time, the Ontario government had slashed a lot of resources to education. So there were a lot of kids that were in mental institutions and treatment facilities that were getting put back into regular classrooms while all the resources were taken away. So it was a really chaotic period of time. And all the while watching these political commercials talking about how they were making education better, which was hilarious. But it was, it really, I think the simple answer to that question, Kevin, is that I learned to never, what it truly means to not judge a book by its cover. And people do what they do for a reason. And I've really transferred that into my coaching and try to look beneath the surface of why that particular goaltender is acting or responding the way that they're acting or responding. I've told this story several times, but there was one incident in particular where I had a young girl who was in the 5th grade who was coming to school every day without her homework done. And the teacher would sanction her and no recesses and lunches and, punish her for that. And next day, same thing. And I ended up testing her. There were no academic difficulties at all. And yet, same process every day. And so because I was working quite closely with a number of gang members, I said to one of my gang guys, hey, what's going on with such and such's family? You know this family? And she said, unfortunately, yes. Or this young lad said, yeah, mom unfortunately was a prostitute and was bringing the Johns into the apartment at night. Well, this little girl was so afraid she'd hide in her closet every night because she was afraid of these strange men coming in. So she would never get her homework done because she fell asleep in the closet every night. Well, that's a horrible story, but it answered the question. Here she is going to school, getting absolutely pounded for not having her homework done. Well, I'll tell you, homework's the last thing on that little girl's mind. And so, as horrible as that story was, it taught you that you couldn't just assume that this kid was a problem and she just didn't want to do her thing. There was something there, and so I had a myriad of stories like that, unfortunately, that I had to deal with. And I remember stepping back going, wow, there's a life lesson. There's a lesson. You don't look at the surface and draw conclusions. You look beneath the surface. And that one was a really, really important one for me as a coach and as a teacher.
Does that go into the importance of building relationships with, like, obviously a totally different level, but not just being a coach, but building relationships with these guys, the conversations, like you said, flying to see Anthony and really understanding him as a goaltender, but also I'm guessing as a person and
Absolutely.
building. Yeah.
Absolutely. What's that old saying? We don't, I say it all the time. I don't coach goalies. I coach people. And what happens in that person's life has a direct impact on their game, and so if I'm not aware, then I'm not really truly coaching them, because I'm not helping them with all of their issues. Because if this one of my goaltenders' wives leaves them and is gone, well, I can work on his rebound control all I want, but I'm not going to get to a root of the problem. And so being able to have these guys talk to you and vent to you and celebrate with you is a fantastic thing, both A, from a relationship point of view, and B, from a coaching point of view.
Do you ever get, like, I often hear, and sometimes we hear it in the coaching world, not just goalie coaching, but at all different, like that line, like between building that relationship, but still being the one that sometimes has to, maybe in some cases, be the hard ass or insist that, like, hey, like, it's work time to put the boots on.
Yes.
The ability to still have that relationship on both ends of things. How important, like, how do you find that line with each guy, or does there even need to be a line as long as you maintain that authority on the other side of it?
And you just said it there. There has to be an understanding of the fact that you are in a position of authority with those guys. And let's not kid ourselves. These guys are making millions of dollars, and stars wield a lot of power. But to me, when you have that relationship with that athlete, to me, that gives you more power to drop the hammer, because then they know that, hey, he's not messing around, and he's doing this for my good. He's not just doing this out of some random power trip, And again, a lot of times when I do have to do that, I will explain why we did that, or I'll say, you know what, we're going to have this discussion after, but we're going to do this now, And so, but if that relationship is there and that relationship is strong, then, very rarely will they not follow.
I was going to say, it probably sounds like it goes back to, you talked earlier about the, not just do this, but the why. Why
Exactly.
are we doing this? Does video play a role in that? Like, is there a lot of work on video and sort of showing, hey, like, I'm seeing this here, or like, where does video fit in for you?
You know what? It's all very different. I've had goaltenders that love to watch every single shot attempt at net. I've had other goaltenders that give me what's important. Give me the 2 or 3 clips that we need to work on, and let's do it. John Gibson is a give me 3 or 4 clips that you think we need to work on. Let's go out and let's do it before practice. Boom. Short to the point. Ryan Miller loves to watch every clip and see how he handled the game as a whole. Dwayne Rolston was the same thing. Marty Biron was similar to that. So I've had different guys over the years that they like to have video tailored to their sort of how they like to view things. And so again, it comes down to getting to know the guy and what they want. And like I said, with Gibson, I clipped the 3 or 4 clips. Here it is. Here's what we need to do. This was a great save. This was not, we need to work on this when we go on practice. We're going to do this before practice. Boom, done. So very short and to the point.
I am never shortened to the point, and this interview has gotten really long. And as Darren Millard likes to give me a hard time all the time, I've always got one last question I want to sneak in. I did want to sneak one more in though.
Sure.
Any advice for young goalie coaches? Because I know a lot of them listen to this podcast. You went from, working as a teacher, but also still goalie coaching. I think you were working out at York as well as a goalie coach. You built relationships. I know it was guys like Stephen Valaket we've had him on the podcast, Kevin Weeks. I remember them raving to me about you when they were playing before I think a lot of people knew who Sudarshan Maharaj was. I'd heard your name through these guys. That path from side gig to now in the National Hockey League for so long. I know you went through the American League. I know with the Islanders, some time with Hockey Canada. There was some in and out there, but what advice would you give to young goaltending coaches who look at where you are now as the ultimate goal, but there is a lot of them. There's a lot of goalie coaches trying to find those different paths and find those different routes to there.
Oh, no question. I get that question a lot, actually. I'll have goalie coaches ask me that at coaching conferences or web sessions and things like that. And there's a few things that I always reach to. And one of them is, before you move to your next level, whatever your next level is, make sure that you make all of your mistakes before you move up to that next level. So if you're coaching in junior, in tier 2, wherever it is, in minor hockey, where it is, make your mistakes there, learn, be overripe, be over ready to get to the next level. And when you get to that level, make your mistakes there and be over ready and overripe and move to the next level. This level is there isn't a lot of forgiveness, and so it's very easy to be one and done, and so you really have to make sure you take care of all your details. Just like you said, you have to learn what your level of ability to connect with your goaltenders is. Develop those interpersonal skills with your goaltenders. Learn where to draw that line, as you pointed out earlier, between friend and coach. There has to be a line there, and learn how to develop that line. That's an important skill. And then, as far as the technical things go, study the goalie coaches that are out there that are great. Study the before Francois was gone, study the Francois Lairs, study the Benoit Lairs, study go through the Rolly Melansons and all of those guys that were there. Really see what those guys are doing and how they're doing it. There was a time, it's kind of gone now, but there was a time I could look at a goaltender and tell you which goalie coach he worked with immediately. Boom. He worked with that goalie coach. Those lines have been blurred now because there's been a uniformity to the way that goalies are coached now, which I think is actually a negative, to go back to your original thing about one size fits all. But I think go and study the guys that are successful. Watch the transformation of goalies that have gone from struggling to succeeding. And what have they improved? How have they improved? So the homework doesn't just happen on the ice. It happens in front of your television, in front of your computer monitor, where you can really say, hey, you know what? I really like the way this goalie does that. I really like the way that goalie does that. What are the strengths of these goalie coaches? I'm gonna focus on that and take a little bit from everybody. Don't be afraid to take a little piece from each and every one.
With the game and the position evolving so quick, as much as you try and keep it simple, with so many different, like whether it's catchphrases or I mean, even like you said, RVH, VH, that's all what, maybe 10 years old, 15 years old on VH. That's a pretty quick transition. How do you stay on top of it? Is it just that same level with homework? Can you get caught in the bubble when you're inside a team? Sometimes teams insulate their goalie coaches from other voices. How do you make sure you stay sharp?
Coaches, regular coaches clinics. I'll go to. It doesn't have to be goalie coaching clinics. It'll be coaching clinics in general. Now, there's some wonderful goalie coaching seminars and things like that, and symposiums that are happening now. Fantastic. I think, but going there with understanding that not everything is going to work. Not everything is going to work for you. Not everything's going to work for your teaching style. Not everything's going to work for your goaltender. But going out there and being exposed to the information, every once in a while somebody tries to come up with a new concept or a new thing. And I can tell you, there were everything from cowling slides to shin pad deflections to there have been some things over the years that have been, here's a way to rip your groin and guarantee a short rebound goal. You can see some of these things that have happened over the years that have dissipated and disappeared. But you have to be strong enough in your understanding of the position to navigate through those things and understand that, hey, these elements work for me. And after a while, slowly, once you've studied those things, you start to see what your vision of what a solid, strong goaltender will look like. And once you've formed that vision, then I think you're ready to move on.
It sounds like the advice we hear from goalies like Jason LaBarbera. When I asked him about all the different coaches he worked with, he said they all give you tools for the toolbox. You got to decide which ones work for you. So it sounds like the same thing can apply to goalie coaching.
Absolutely, it should.
All right. Sudsy, thank you so much for your time. I want to let you go because I've taken up half your week here with this conversation. And I want to make sure you get out of here so you can enjoy and really get to soak in Ryan Miller's last game here in a couple of days. I know that might not be the focus for you guys, but an absolute legend of the position, and it must be an absolute treat to be there firsthand to witness this, because from the outside, it sure looks like it's special because it's been a special career. It must be neat to be on the inside.
Yeah, there are certain little things I will never forget. The night that he broke the record for most wins by a U.S.-born goaltender, Josh Manson, one of our defensemen, I whispered to Josh that, hey, tonight's the night, I think. At the end of one of the periods, pick up one of the pucks, because the puck, Ryan's going to get the game puck at the end, but I want one too. And so at the end of the second period, Josh grabbed that puck. And so at the end of the game, when Ryan was sort of holding up his puck in victory, I had one too. And we had a picture taken with the two of us holding up a puck from his game where he broke the record. So there's no question. It's been a pleasure. This morning, optional skate, who's out on the ice? Ryan Miller. And so that workout, that work ethic, and that dedication to his craft is literally, he has hours left in his career, and there he is still working on his game. Incredible.
I think that's part of what made such a great career, is how much he loved being out there. So thanks for all the stories. Thanks for the great insights, and enjoy another evening that I'm sure will be full of great memories on Saturday.
Thanks very much. Pleasure.
Sensorino VR bringing you our feature interviews. Sudarshan Maharaj from the Anaheim Ducks. That was you're right, Woody. That might be one of my three picks for our top podcast recommendations, podcast episodes from InGoal Radio, the podcast. Well done.
Except you can't pick it because I already did, much like the Vezina thing. Thanks for letting me go first.
Okay. That's what's your take? You've known Sudsy a long time, so it might be more difficult to just narrow it down to that particular discussion. But what do you take away from that?
Oh, I mean, there's so much. And we talked actually for probably over an hour afterwards as well. I think at a time when the game gets broken down so much technically, and guilty as charged on that myself. We've talked about that before, how easy it is sometimes to pick apart and look at the technical game. Just recognizing that there is so much more to it, and how important the relationships are, how important it is not to put everyone in a box. I mean, Ryan Miller, some of the anecdotes he shared about him, and what a great example of, some things that are becoming a bit of a lost art. And I think there are times when outside observers watch John Gibson, for example, and think, yeah, maybe he could be tighter, maybe he could do this different. But I think there's a very conscious effort not to lose John Gibson by trying to make him something else. And that's one of the things that makes Gibson such a special goaltender, is that Sudsy hasn't tried to take away some of the instinctive elements in his game by making him too technical. And it's a really tough thing to judge right now. We always talk about, we started this thing with Vezina and environment and what's the defensive environment for the team. Goaltending never exists in a vacuum. And so I think it's very tough to judge the goaltenders in Anaheim right now, because that environment is just so bad and has been for so long. I worry about the cumulative effect of that. And so I think that makes the relationship part even more important, not just for a goalie coach who's trying to make sure he doesn't lose his guy in terms of what makes him special on the ice, but trying to not lose a guy who's, just basically been through the ringer, playing behind a team that, has struggled so much on the ice as well. So lots of takeaways there, but that was one of the ones that just the human element of this often gets overlooked from the outside observers, and it's a very important part.
I loved acknowledging how much the goalie partner relationship plays into it. John and Ryan bouncing stuff off each other, Stolar's as well with Anthony in that mix, talking about it, going back and forth. And the don't judge the book by its cover, and that anecdote from his teaching days with that poor young girl, and getting underneath the what is causing the behavior or the decisions can be related to in all facts of life. But I thought that was wonderful. Hutch, that was a fun interview. Sudsy is a great guy, and he's had a couple of different stops, and he continues to progress and continues to take things from different elements of goaltending. And he is a cool guy, isn't he?
Some of our listeners might be, new to Sudsy, in the sense that, we haven't spoken about him as much as perhaps we should, because within the goaltending industry, amongst his peers in the industry, this is one of the most respected guys in the game. Gets spoken of by, as I say, by his peers in the same realm as some of the guys like the Allairs and the Corns of the world. And he's been around the game for a long time. I actually met Sudsy before Woody and I became a partnership here at InGoal. When Kevin Weeks connected the two of us, he was fascinated by what we got started here at InGoal, and Sudsy wanted to get involved a little bit. And so he was sort of a quiet support in the background, actually did a historical article way back in about, I think, 2010 for us as well. So he's got a profound interest in the history of the game and the development of the position, and has been, working at it for so long that he has gained an incredible respect amongst his peers in the game. And at the end of the day, isn't that what we all really want? Great career for Sudsy so far, and looking forward to some great things going forward.
Be remiss not to mention the fact that he asked Manson to grab the puck after one of the periods before the record was set by Ryan Miller. That's forward thinking right there. But you also do it as a whisper. Can you grab the puck tonight? That'd be really cool if we could do that. I'm not sure if that's exactly how it went, but thanks to Sudarshan Maharaj for joining us. Sudsy, the goalie coach for the Anaheim Ducks. Cam over at the Hockey Shop, a source for sports, Surrey, thehockeyshop.com. They have some amazing things going on there. Just rolling out the stuff, and really looking forward to getting up and running. Woody, they rock and roll over at the Hockey Shop, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. The new True stuff, obviously we talked about this week, but it's coming fast and furious now, and you'll see us shift the focus a little bit in the next couple of weeks, just as we did last week with the CCM 5.9. We're going to really try and dig into some of the second price points. I think the focus for us at InGoal Mag a lot of the time is on the pro level. And that's not necessarily the stuff that everyone wears for whether it's for kids or for beer league. Sometimes that next tier down is really important. And there have been some massive strides in that gear that we're going to go over in the next couple of weeks. Bauer's launch is coming up at the end of the month, May 20th, for all their new lines. We already told you about Hyperlight because you can order it custom online from thehockeyshop.com now and have been able to for a while. But the rest of their stuff is about to hit the store. And there's some really exciting elements in that line, especially in that second price point. A pad that we had on the ice just a couple of weeks ago in 3X that I swear there are pro level pad attributes to this for less than half the price. So I'm really excited to get back there, all these new launches, and we're going to try and dig a little deeper over the next couple of weeks and get into some of the gear that is good enough for most of us, frankly, but often gets overlooked in our pro gear reviews. There's a lot of exciting stuff coming.
Hey, speaking of our Hyperlight, congratulations to Ben Goudreau and Team Canada who won the World Under-18 Championship last night.
Dominating performance, and they rolled through. That can't be easy, but did they keep their focus or what? That was an awesome performance and a great celebration. Almost felt normal, right? Some people in the stands, a hockey celebration, gloves going up, yard sale at the end, and a trophy being presented. It was a great bit of progress for everybody. Sudsy, you are awesome. Cam, keep on rocking it over at the Hockey Shop, source for sports story, thehockeyshop.com. And for Woody and Hutch, thanks for listening to this latest edition of InGoal Radio, the podcast. We'll be back with you next week for the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs.